You probably did have a couple of beers. You didn't see the media.
No, I didn't drive the car either, and for them to hop out was incredible. The security hired for me, but
So was he?
No.
Was he here?
I will talk to my husband.
You can talk to him, but you're not going anywhere.
I know what you will not do is tell me what I can't do.
All right, I want to play shotgun.
Don't, please, don't.
Are you doing that?
Yep.
Welcome to Pop Tea Gossip, where we cover celebrity gossip, entertainment, as well as reality TV recaps. Thank you so much for joining me for our first episode on my channel ever. To go out with a bang, I would love to cover the Karen Huger story that is recently circulating. I personally believe that there is more to this story that meets the eye, because I think what we're all starting to wonder now is what really happened that night. Something is not adding up with the story, and we're here to break it down today. So, starting with the clip that was played in the beginning of this video, it covers something that Ashley from Real Housewives of Potomac has recently mentioned, that there was another person in the car when Karen was driving. And in the clip played earlier, you can hear Karen Huger telling Ray, and it becomes illegible, but she says that she hopped out of the car and that she wasn't driving. And the theory, and this is of course allegedly, is that there may have been another person in the car that night when she was driving. And I know that a couple of reviewers and YouTubers have covered this angle as well, but I wanted to deep dive into why someone like Karen would go as far as to hide this truth and let it get to as far as her going to jail, which she has been recently sentenced to 1 year in prison, I believe 1 year on probation, and I think she will actually be on probation for 5 years following her prison stay. So, in Karen's words, what happened that night is that she had a few beers, got in the vehicle, but then admits to Ray that she wasn't the one who was actually driving. Fast forward to most recently, what was played on the Real Housewives of Potomac reunion, Karen mentions that she has been struggling with self-medicating and taking her medications while she's also drinking alcohol, so that can get her to a pretty lit state. So as we see this footage play out during the reunion, it just makes you wonder, Karen Huger, who is someone who is private, does this sound believable to you? Someone who has been accused by Robin, Charisse, and these are former castmates, who have accused her of having a problem with drinking and that she's a fraud and the truth would eventually come out about her. And then this incident presents itself where the fans find out that this is not her first DUI, but this is actually her fourth DUI. So it makes you wonder, why would someone like Karen now, who is often private, someone who, whenever she had gotten into trouble, well, if Ray got into legal trouble, the story was published on the Washington Post, but Karen had a really hard time talking to the girls about the reality of the situation because she considers herself someone to be private. So it makes you wonder, in a situation like this, why would she now come forward and admit to this problem that she's been having, which has resulted to her fourth DUI? I, playing the devil's advocate, would like to say that something is not adding up. Listening to the footage where she admits to Ray that she's not driving, I am leaning more towards the theory that aligns with what Ashley mentioned, the potential of another person being in the car. I think that, first of all, Karen, sis, we need answers. I mean, I know you're locked up right now, but we really do need answers because, you know, Dr. Wendy pointed out in the reunion that she could have done this play of going to rehab and admitting to this issue in order to get a lighter sentence. But I beg to differ when we really pay attention to the timeline and what Karen has claimed that she stands on. You know, her entire persona on the show has been centered around her beliefs in her institution of marriage, and that is something that she has branded herself around. If you think about the past couple of years of her being on the show, Karen very much brands herself as this former housewife who had a successful husband who was the Black Bill Gates, and she fell upon this opportunity to become a star on television, and she ran with it with the support of her husband. She's also covered the angle of Ray being in a more supportive role and that how that has changed the dynamics of their relationship. So Karen has very much branded herself around her marriage, and she's very proud about it. So that brings me to why we may not know the full truth about what happened that night. When you think about who Karen is, the generation that she's a part of, and you're giving her a persona beyond what she wants us to see and what the television producers have presented to us. When you break down the persona of someone like Karen, who comes from a generation where they really do value privacy, they really do value that angle to be able to tell your own story on your own time in your own way. And even throughout the years, we've watched her come out of her shell and open up a little bit more. But when it comes to her institution, her marriage, her family, very traditional in a sense. So it is to no surprise that Karen would go this far to protect the secret that I'm about to uncover, allegedly. So I believe that based on the timelines and the persona that Karen presents, this mother, this doting, or formerly doting wife, and now she's a more empowered wife who has her own businesses and is on a reality TV show. It is so different than the person that Ray married however many years ago. So with that being said, knowing the importance that Karen has valued around her institution of marriage, which she likes to call it, Karen may have been with someone that night. Karen may have been in the car with another person. They like to say allegedly blue eyes. In the recording played earlier, which is the actual audio from the scene that night, Karen says to Ray, the driver that you hired for me. And in the past, they would poke around and say that she was messing around with blue eyes. But I think the reason why Karen is willing to go down like this is because if there was someone else in the car, Karen would much rather come forward and be, known as a drunk, someone who's struggling with this problem, due to all the hardships life has given her over the years. She would much rather be painted in the public, knowing that she's on a reality TV show and that millions of viewers are tuning in. There's a lot of articles going around. And so, she acted a fool that night, showed her ass. And Karen would much rather that truth be painted than to have to admit that she is an adulterer, that she is someone who may have an open arrangement with Ray where she's allowed to, like she said before on the show, have eye candy, but she can't quote unquote touch. She can only look and have eye candy. But Karen understands the weight and the judgment that would come if they were to find another person in the car who happened to be a male. If it was a driver, it would make sense unless the driver has something to lose where Karen was willing to take on the risk for him. It just makes sense for the driver to flee if it was a male, someone that she may have had an arrangement with, and she was out having a good time, and it just happened that he had to get out of there and, fled the scene. And so I could see this being what could be closer to the truth and something that Karen would refuse to admit, because then it would leave the probability of people thinking, is Karen an adulterer? And Karen doesn't want that associated with her brand, with her image, with how much value and emphasis she puts on the institution of marriage that she has with Ray. So I believe that there's a strong chance that the person who is the quote-unquote driver that Ray hired for her could have been a male companion. And the truth coming out that Karen has this person and how it would be portrayed, Karen would much rather admit that she likes to have a few beers every now and then and takes her medication with it. She would much rather admit that than to be known as an adulterer and this permanently mess with her brand, because she does come from a generation that really does care about how that appears, which is why in the past she's had a little bit more trouble opening up. And it's not to say that people from her generation don't tend to open up and be vulnerable, but it's just a pattern. And I believe she's a boomer, so it's a pattern with how they were taught to deal with things. And so admitting you have this little problem that you can go to rehab for is a lot smaller than being known as an adulterer or, a woman who her husband allows to have a companion. Society isn't as forgivable to women for things like that. And Karen Huger is a smart woman. She's someone who evaluated that, and to be so confident that she would be vindicated someday because, the truth would come out in this vindication. The next logical thing to me would be that she thought somehow it would play out where she wasn't responsible for this, knowing, the truth is that she wasn't driving. So in her heart of hearts, she may know, like, I didn't do this damage. I wasn't the one who was driving. So maybe there could have been an angle to play that out. And that's the risk that she took when she decided to take this to trial, which we all know that she recently lost. But that is my theory. I think it is more of a cover up. It's just one of those things where if you admit this version of the truth, maybe people won't go looking over there, which is good on Ashley to have us look at what was said, which was her admitting to Ray in the footage that she wasn't driving and that, it sounds a little illegible, but she says that she almost hopped out of the car or hopped out of somewhere and, the driver that Ray had hired for her. So that is what I think is the truth and what I think that Karen refused to admit, because it's more acceptable for us to see, like, okay, she has a problem versus, she was out with the man, and this is where, this entire thing unraveled. So let me know what you think in the comments. I am sticking to this theory, just knowing our pattern with our girl Karen and her ability to, admit the truth and share some of those more vulnerable moments. I do think it is interesting to see that Andy Cohen has recently spoken out and just saying that he's keeping her in his thoughts and, how it's just so sad. But since she's been sentenced, he doesn't have much to say. And a part of me thinks that Andy Cohen knows at this stage of the game, with this probably being a good handful amount of Real Housewives ending up in jail or prison, not directly because of the show, but somehow in association of the show. And whether it's not associated with the show, because these women are heavily branded with the Bravo network branding with the shows, it does somehow still connect the show back to these women. So I think that Andy Cohen is also playing it very safe with the recent lawsuits and conversations that have circulated with him involved with some of the behind the scenes mechanics when it comes to producing these shows. I do think that he is wanting to play a lot more safe, which is why we saw him disclaim in the reunion that he did not proclaim Karen as the Grand Dame of Potomac. So it is nice to see that he is speaking out in support and just, sharing empathy. But overall, him stating that he's a Karen fan, but making it very clear that driving drunk is no joke. And he was just very surprised to hear from a Potomac judge that had previous, the judge who stated that Karen had previous legal troubles involving alcohol. I think it was very clear he was making his stance by letting it be known that I am in support of Karen Huger, but I am not in support of this decision that she's made, where it's landed her in her fourth situation dealing with a DUI. So let me know what you think in the comments. This is my theory. I am not saying I'm inflexible, and so I'm sticking to it only. I'm not saying that, but I do think that just paying attention to, someone like Karen Huger and the history we've had with our girl, something tells me that this is just one admission to omit something else. And if she in fact is taking the fall for someone because she would rather be known as, this habit she has versus the fact that she was out with a young man and now it's cost her all this legal trouble, time in prison, probation, as well as her license being suspended. I mean, it is one hefty price to pay, but I do hope that this inspires her to live in her truth. And if she's going to be on reality television, like she said, she's going to come back as Karen Huger. The Grand Dame has been fun, but I also wonder if part of the Grand Dame persona is what has helped land her here. So I'm open to all thoughts and comments and look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Stay tuned for our next video.